So we're back talking about fighting games, and I figured I could give you guys something to look at this time around. So we got some Salty Bet, the greatest game you can't play. So in the last rant about fighting games, I don't really remember, but I think I might have said something along the lines of, you know, out of all the video game genres out there, fighting games are the only one where RPG elements haven't really invaded or made their mark, which is technically true, because the fighting games that you hear people talking about generally are the more competitive ones, and the ones that have long-term appeal, because like RPG mechanics, they take the balance and throw it out the window. So it's just difficult to balance a fighting game when you have RPG elements. But I mistakenly said that there weren't that many, or they haven't really been fighting games with RPG elements aside from a couple. And so I did a ton of research, and I had completely forgotten about the Dissidia series, and I should have remembered that and looked there first, because you would think Final Fantasy and fighting games, of course there's going to be some RPG elements in there, but I completely forgot all about that, because I'd only played a demo of that game on the PSP, and so I need to revisit that and see how that game handled its RPG mechanics. Because from what I saw, the research that I did, like you can level up in the middle of a match, but you don't really deal with that, those mechanics until after the match is over, and it's in between matches where you're customizing your character, equipping different gear, and assigning attacks or special moves or things like that, and leveling up your character and your gear. So my idea for leveling, oh man, it's a titty match. The bets are gonna be all over the place on this one. Oh man, this is so distracting. Gotta try and stay focused. What was I talking about? The cameraman. Look at the cameraman in the background. He's like, oh yeah, do it. Yeah, definitely was talking about something. There are several games that have had RPG mechanics, several fighting games, anyway. And I was surprised to learn that there are a couple Dragon Ball Z games on the PS2, either Tenkaichi 3 or Budokai 3, or I think it was Budokai 3, actually. Budokai 3 or one of the Tenkaichi games, where you could actually level up by fighting lower level characters. Like if you were having trouble with a certain boss or something, you could go to a lower level and grind to improve your stats and make it easier to beat the boss. So like if your attacks weren't doing enough damage, that usually means that you're not a high enough level and stuff like that. So need to play that, because a friend of mine had played those, but I never got into the Budokai games. But they're not terrible games. They're just very anime cash grab like. That's kind of their thing. Obviously, having a seizure. Nope, that's a lot of flashing lights. I should probably stop looking at the screen. So, Dissidia, the Budokai games, and several others, there are actually tons of fighting games that have RPG mechanics, and, but again, you don't really hear about those. So then, I got to thinking about it, and I realized, technically building meter in a fighting game is an RPG mechanic when you think about it. Oh man, that hurt. That was really bad. I don't know about you guys. I hope you guys are okay. I should put a warning, like if you have epilepsy, do not watch this. Oh, it's bad. Ow. So, if I can just, recombobulate my brain, discombobulate. I need to watch those Sherlock movies again too. Those are pretty good. I don't think I really appreciated them when they first came out, but the second one was vastly superior to the first. Getting off topic. So the what? Who do we got? Oh man, Majin Vegeta. That's not Majin Vegeta. Oh, okay. He's hiding behind Tournament of Power Goku. This Goku's weak on the left there, and Black Goku's not even Goku. He's not even black. It's weird. I don't know why they call, just because he's wearing black. That's a dumb reason to call him Black Goku. Should be Dark Goku. That I would understand. And then the fact that Frieza is taller than anyone, that doesn't make any sense. This match is a shit show. What the hell am I talking about? Maybe this is why I don't, do video, because I just distracted by the spectacle. But oh well. I mean, at least you guys have something to look at, right? Better than nothing. What was I talking about? Well, okay. Forget everything I was saying. Let's talk about why fighting games specifically are the best way to tell a story in a game. To me, it boils down to character design and stuff like that. Like when you have a fighting game, you have this roster of characters. Each one has they have their own motivations. They have their own reasons for fighting, and if it's a tournament or whatever reason they have for being there, they have this thing that drives them. And anytime they run up to another character, any other character in the game that they fight with, there's the potential for drama there, because the opponent, they have their motivations for fighting in the tournament, right? And so you have these opposing ideals oftentimes, or sometimes, like both characters, they have equally good reasons for being there, and it's like, you don't necessarily want one to lose. One has to win, but you also want the other character, for their dream to come true also. So it's, there's so much potential for drama and conflict. This was a bad idea. I don't think I'll do this ever again. This is just I'm having too much fun. That's the problem. Okay, so let's take a fighting game that most people should be familiar with. Let's take Street Fighter, right? Ryu just wants to be super strong, right? But hey, whatever. Those are his reasons. And then Sakura wants to be super strong. Okay, so Street Fighter's a bad example. The writing in Street Fighter is actually terrible. But you know what fighting game actually has really good writing, and that's the reason why it's my favorite? The Tekken series, obviously. So, Tekken, right? Kazuya, he fights in the tournament because he wants to defeat his father as revenge for throwing him off a cliff when he was 5. That's pretty good motivation, right? And then let's say, Yoshimitsu, he's a Robin Hood figure, so he's trying to win the tournament to get the $1 billion cash prize so that he can give it to poor people, right? He's a nice dude. So if you have Kazuya versus Yoshimitsu, you understand both of their motivations. If you're playing as Kazuya, you don't necessarily want Yoshimitsu to lose, but he has to, because Kazuya has to kill his dad. You just got to kill him. And you understand where Kazuya is coming from, and you're like, yeah, he deserves his revenge. This dude with this weird, he's got this spiky, he's got 2 mohawks on the side of his head. Who decided that was a good idea for a haircut when he went into the barber that day? He should die just for that. That's reason enough to get thrown into a volcano. What is Vegeta doing? So yeah, So Heihachi's got to die. You want Kazuya to win, but you also don't want poor people to starve. And so when those two characters, Kazuya and Yoshimitsu, when they face up against each other in a fight, like that's an interesting story. Chuckle Nourish. So the sprite is based on it's a sprite edit of Joseph Joestar. And interestingly enough, like you can see, like just by the silhouette, I've seen this character before in full color, but he's got an interesting silhouette. And so that's what's cool about fighting games, is that the characters, they have body language that's unique to them, and their body language gives you an idea of what their overall character is like. You look at Vega and you see his stance, their fighting style, the clothes they wear, the yips and yells that they do during the match, and things like that. These are all things that give you hints about the character, and and establishes their personality. Something I forgot to mention was leveling in a fighting game. Right, so check this out, right? Building meter is, in a way, this character has some weird meter generation stuff going on. Oh yeah, she's from Melty Blood, that's why. But building meter in a fighting game is technically a form of leveling up, because like the more meter you have, that opens up your options, and you have different abilities based on how much meter you have. So in fact, like in a lot of fighting games, it's even known as like a level 1 super or a level 3 super. And if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, I think the meter at the bottom of the screen, it actually says level LVL, level 1, 2, and 3, up to 5, I think. And so like like if you only have 1 bar of meter, you can only do a level 1 super. But if you have 3 bars, then you can do a level 3 super. So technically, that would qualify as a level up, because like you build up a number, and you get access to more options in combat. Which is not to say that RPG mechanics, it's simply leveling up. You get what I mean? Like I don't want to imply that like an RPG is simply a game where you level up. But there are levels to this in more ways than one, right? But yeah, after thinking about it, I realized like, okay, technically you can say that building meter is a form of leveling up, but what I'm interested in is like something more steady, and not temporary. Because the thing about meter is that it's fleeting, and if you don't use it, you lose it, for one, and then if you do use it, then it's gone forever, and then you have to start the process over again. So what I'm looking for in terms of RPG mechanics is something that's more permanent, and something less superficial. No, it's not what I'm trying to say. I guess permanent. I'm looking for permanent progression, and more I don't know, fill in the blank. Something that's more stable. Yeah, stable progression instead of like temporary meter building. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the gist of it. You have, that's what storytelling's all about. It's about personalities clashing, and and the creation of drama through overcoming obstacles, and seeing how characters overcome those obstacles based on what choices they make. And the thing about RPGs is that RPGs are all about choices. Something that's weird about RPGs, like a traditional RPG, like if we're talking tabletop or a classical RPG, like the classic Final Fantasies, or CRPGs like Baldur's Gate or even Ultima, just name an old school, an RPG before like the year 2000. Generally, the thing about RPGs is that you can't really play them. The only thing that you're doing is you're making choices for the character, and then the stats determine whether that choice is successful or not. And those are the dice rolls, right? It's all when things are left up to dice rolls, then technically you're not playing the game. It's left up to chance. So is Salty Bet an RPG? Man, that's an argument could be made. I'm not going to make that argument, not right now, but maybe I could. I don't know. That's interesting. I'll have to think about that. But in that same vein, when I was thinking about, fighting games and RPG mechanics, I'm thinking about my idea and how to merge RPG mechanics in the middle of a match. And there were some other games that I'm forgetting about, games where you actually do level up in the middle of a match. But obviously I forgot about them because they didn't make an impact. But that's what I'm thinking about. My idea revolves around, like a match. What is happening? What is that dude doing? I don't think he's gonna win. No, wait, he's got it. His hit counter's going up. That's an interesting mechanic. There's this game called Killer is Dead. It's a Suda 51 joint, and in that game you get different moves based on how high your combo meter is. So most games, like take Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden or Bayonetta, you have the same moveset no matter what. But in Killer is Dead, it had this really interesting mechanic that I wish more games would do. You would actually get different moves, like not just like different moves, but stronger, more fluid, and more damage dealing combos if you had a higher ranking in combat. Such a good system. But seeing the combo number get larger, I guess, it reminded me of that. So they've taken Salty Bet. You can see the UI up at the top of the screen. They're converting Salty Bet into more of an RPG, and so that led to this idea for this hypothetical game that will probably never get made. But I'm going to turn this into a full-fledged video essay, and hopefully somebody else will take these ideas and run with them. So I was thinking about what happened with that last fight? I wasn't paying attention, but we got two different Rugels here. President Rugel? This is going to be a good fight. Whenever Rugel shows up, dude, man, this guy, he never fails to disappoint. He's a very entertaining character. But I was never big into the King of Fighters series, so I'm not super familiar with him. But anyway, so like I said, trying to merge RPG mechanics, well, in a more meaningful way in fighting games by having a fighting game match, and then in between rounds you're able to level up. And so there would just be 5 levels. I guess it depends on how many rounds, but I think 5 is optimal. You got 5 rounds, so in between rounds you level up. And so I would imagine it would work like the way your soldiers do in XCOM, where in between rounds you pick a perk, and and maybe a fighting style or something, or you either add a new move, or I don't think stat bonuses would be a good idea, because that could lead to matches dragging out for too long. And as I mentioned the first time around, like the length of rounds needs to be kept low, because there's going to be tons of rounds. So overall, like the matches need to be would be about standard length, so that shorter rounds, and then you have like 10 seconds in between the rounds to pick your perk or your whatever, I don't know. I haven't worked out any of the details, so sue me. I don't think anybody did any damage. Is he regenerating? I'm not really paying attention to the fight. I'm trying not to pay attention so that I can get these ideas out. But like I said, this might have been either the best idea or the worst idea. You guys let me know what you guys think. But anyway, so I was thinking about how this game should work, and one of the ideas that I had was that, like, you know, there should be characters that are physically weak to the point where if they tried to punch another character, like, they would just do no damage. So distracted by these seizures, you guys. You gotta understand. My epilepsy level is max. Epilepsy maximum. So anyway. So when I was thinking about, like, characters that couldn't do damage to other characters because they were too physically weak, you know, I got to thinking, like, this idea, it would make more sense if it was an arena fighter. But arena fighters, you know, they have this stigma about them because they're usually cheap anime cash grabs. But, you know, apparently, like, there are some good arena fighters out there. And actually, like, the first Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm was a pretty good game, and I saw this video that pointed out, like, most arena fighters these days, they use Ultimate Ninja Storm as a template, and it's a fun game. You know, it's a fun little distraction. It's not competitive by any means, but if you're a fan of the show, it's a cool game to play. So, but the thing about arena fighters is that they take place in an arena, and so there's potential there for utilizing the environment, and, you know, was it another draw? So I think that means red's gonna win. This match was insane, dude. No, blue won. Okay, wow, I'm surprised. I wouldn't have bet on that one. What was I talking about? Utilizing the environment. You know, like, just imagine, like, an arena fighter, a fighting game where Broken versus Koryu. What does that mean? I think blue. If this is the Koryu, I think it is. He's about to whoop Broken's ass. Broken. Is it like broken? It's broken. It's obviously broken, but it's like Ken the bro. I don't know what. Maybe it's both, but that's an interesting play on words. So Ryu and Ken, right? What does Ken want in his life? To have lots of money, I guess, and to take care of his daughter, who spent. Like, his wife spent 15 years being pregnant. It's ridiculous. Oh yeah, that's Ryu I'm thinking of. Just projectiles all day. All day projectiles. But Broken's holding his own. Man. His combos are kind of devastating, but you can't beat Koryu because those projectiles, they come from every direction. And yeah. Look at that. Did he go through a portal? What the hell happened? Like I said, this was a bad idea, but if you guys like it, I'll keep doing it. You know. Yeah, utilizing the environment is I think something that fighting games. What the hell happened? I looked away for 5 seconds. I turned back around, and Ken demolished Koryu. And I guess that's why he's broken. He's that broken that he can. You know, I wasn't looking at the screen. And then Ken whips Ryu's ass. What the hell happened? This Blossom's gonna get her ass beat for sure. There's no way. I hope she wins, though, because Powerpuff Girls is a sick-ass show. I'm gonna try and wrap this up because the ads are getting annoying, and as soon as this is done, I have to find another ad blocker because the one I got is not working. So, What was I talking about? I don't remember because reasons. But yeah, anyway, fighting games, you know, there's a potential for change. And I've been doing a lot of research on fighting games and playing a bunch of different games to try and figure out. Last night I went on this binge, and as is usually the case, you know, when I'm researching a topic in game design, I usually wind up, you know, going down a rabbit hole, and eventually all research leads to the same question. In this case, it was, what is a fighting game? And that's been a topic that's been on people's minds recently, because during the Game Awards, Sifu was nominated for Best Fighting. Not necessarily Best Fighting Game, because it's very obviously not a fighting game, but Best Fighting. That was the category. Because Sifu deserved to win something, but because that game is fantastic. But you know, the Game Awards is just it's so farcical. Like, honestly, winning something at the Game Awards is more indicative of like, I don't know. It's really not a point of pride like it should be. Like, you know, winning something from the Game Awards, it really means nothing. Less than nothing, you know, like. But Sifu does deserve recognition because it's a fantastic game. But when that was nominated for Best Fighting, again, not necessarily Best Fighting Game, but it was nominated for Best Fighting. And so that sparked a discussion, I think, because that created some confusion. Like, well, are they saying it's the best fighting game? Like, what's... Because the thing is, like, it was the only game of its kind. All the other games that were nominated for Best Fighting were actual fighting games, including multiverses. And so, you know, so that popped up, you know, as I'm researching all these games, then I asked myself, okay, what is a fighting game? Do we have a definition? And after hours upon hours of research, I arrived at the conclusion that we can't really have a definition. Traditional fighting games are pretty easy to define because they look like this. Their lineage can be traced back to Street Fighter 2. And so, like, when you have like games like Salty Bet, which are Salty Bet is made in the Mugen free fighting game engine, and you know, that engine it's a Street Fighter 2 derivative. Technically, it's not literally derivative of Street Fighter 2, but it has like the standard. You get what I'm saying. It has the standard traditional fighting game mechanics that we would all expect. Health bars, meter, and you could customize all these bars so they don't have to be right here. You could have meters at the bottom. In fact, there was a Dragon Ball Z fan game that was made in Mugen that was it was really good, and you know, it looked completely different. But in Salty Bet, the mechanics are mostly Street Fighter 2 based. So you have the health bars at the and meter. You know, generally, whoa, what is that? General Zod? That looks like Michael Shannon. That's crazy. That's nuts. But yeah, you're gonna have the health bars at the top of the screen, and that's what's interesting, right? Is that if you have a fighting game where the health bars are not in at the top of the screen, then it's like what the hell is this? Imagine that. I can't imagine a fighting game. A traditional fighting game where the health bars weren't at the top of the screen. But that's I should explore that because that's an interesting property. This level, this stage, is this new? This looks really good. I've never seen this stage before. That's interesting. What game is that from? Damn, that's crazy. But anyway, bars. Health bars at the top of the screen. When you lose life, they go towards the center. You know, a counter, a round timer. You know, that's Street Fighter 2 building meter. I forget which game what was the first game to add meter. Street Fighter 2 did eventually have a special meter, but I don't think it was the first game to do it. I think that was a later addition. I'm not sure, but special attacks, you know, a fighting game doesn't have to have that. We're seeing tons of fighting games now with one button specials, which I personally hate, but the fighting game community is going to embrace it because apparently fighting games they're already pretty niche, and they, in order to allow the scene to continue, you got to make concessions, which is why that's a crazy attack, just like noodle arms. You gotta allow people to do whatever they want, or else you're not gonna have participants to play your games. So that's why the hitbox is turning legal, even though it shouldn't be. And the one button supers, Street Fighter 6 has a new control scheme, and apparently, I think Justin Wong, he tried it for like the first time and like immediately won a tournament or something. Something like that. There's a video out there, like the new control scheme. Like, oh no, he did a 15 win streak. That's what it was. He switched to the modern controls. I'm trying to. I think my head wanted to say constraint, but my mouth was trying to say controls, so it came out controls. But anyway, he switched to modern controls and got a 15 win streak. So there's obviously an unfair advantage there. And so with my idea for making a fighting game and like adding RPG mechanics and then characters that can't actually attack, so they have to like find items or plant traps in the environment, balancing a game like that is just impossible. There's just no way. You're not gonna ever balance a game like that, so don't even try to balance it. I have this idea for how to let the community balance itself. Maybe I'll talk about that another time. But there was something specific that I wanted to mention, but I completely forgot. What is the dude on the right doing? What is he? Is he dancing? That's a crazy stance, dude. That's nuts. The question was, what is a fighting game? And I went on a long-ass rant. Ow, seizure. Yeah. Traditional fighting games like this, like Street Fighter 2, or Third Strike, or Tekken, Virtua Fighter, I would consider all of those traditional fighting games. You start with Street Fighter 2 as a template, and then you either add or remove things, to suit your game. So in Third Strike, you got parrying, and some of the combos are super combos, and like the normal combos are a little more involved than Street Fighter 2. And with a 3D fighting game like Tekken or Virtua Fighter, you add sidestepping. You might remove, for some of the games, you might remove super combos, but in Tekken, maybe you add super combos or, rage arts or whatever. So basically, you start with Street Fighter 2 and you go from there, right? That's a traditional fighting game in my eyes. But there are a ton of games that are very clearly fighting games that don't fit into the mold of Street Fighter 2. They might have some influence, or so they might share some DNA, but they don't look anything like a traditional fighting game. So how do you even know they are a fighting game? Well, I mean, there's a couple examples. So let's get out of Salty Bet, right? Because it's probably just going to be an ad anyway. So let's look at let's take a look at this game. Take a look at Virtual On, right? Okay, I was looking at this last night. Pretty cool game, Here's a game where most of your attacks are not melee attacks. They're in fact projectiles. He just got hit by a barrage of missiles. He got a sniper gun. you can throw grenades and things. So for all intents and purposes, this game is actually a shooter, but it's also a fighting game. Like, you know, you have the health bars at the top of the screen. There's a timer. You know, there's a small contained arena that they're fighting in. There's no block button, but there is blocking because you can use objects in the environment for cover. So technically, there is blocking. You just have to be able to dash or move behind cover to avoid your enemy's projectiles. So, you know, a lot of traditional fighting games, like Street Fighter, have projectiles, Hadokens and stuff. So that's technically shooting in a way. So, oh, we lost. Oh, that's too bad. But Virtual On, you know, is embraced by certain circles within the fighting game community as a fighting game. Like, it was intended to be a fighting game, but you play as giant robots. And so, you know, here's a game that looks absolutely nothing like a traditional fighting game, and yet it absolutely is a fighting game, despite the fact, look, he just threw a grenade. Despite the fact that most of the attacks are projectiles, there are some melee options, but not really. Like, the primary focus is on shooting. But how crazy is that? Like, it very clearly is a fighting game. You know? So, alright, so you have games like Virtual On, right? And then you've got games like For Honor. Where's the video that I was looking at? Let me just see a trailer. A trailer will be fine. No, not a cinematic. Trailer was a bad idea because it's all cinematics. What is this? This seems like good gameplay. Oh, it's got somebody's face. I hate videos like that. I will never watch somebody reacting to their own gameplay. That's why you'll never see my face on a video, because like I think it like it's a big ass fucking like square that removes important information on the screen. I've never seen a stream that didn't have where someone like had their face on the screen that didn't obscure important information. So I just want some gameplay. That's all I want. This will work, I hope. Anyway, so let's look at For Honor, right? It's a multiplayer game. What is this, a tutorial? Can we skip ahead? Jesus. Yeah, it's a tutorial. All right, so check this out, right? It looks a lot like an arena fighter. You know, it has almost the same camera system as the Ultimate Ninja Storm games or any other anime arena fighter like Jump Force or whatever. But it kind of plays like the control scheme is like a third-person shooter. It's not a traditional fighting game by any means, you know, but you have an environment that you can actually traverse. Like that's something that it adds to the gameplay, like navigation within a 3D environment. So, For Honor, absolutely, I would classify it as a fighting game, despite the fact that it plays like a third-person shooter, but it has all the elements of a fighting game, so it has to be a fighting game. But it's non-traditional, absolutely. But look at the combat here. It has all the elements. It's got parrying. It has combos. It has blocking and you know, distancing, angling, and timing, and footsies, and I don't know what's missing. Maybe overhead attacks, mix-ups, cross-ups, things like that. Maybe this game has it. I haven't played it. I need to get around to doing that, because maybe I know there's a lot of strategy and a lot of depth in these games, so it might not have the things you might expect from a traditional fighting game. Like you know, I think some characters might even have projectiles. I'm not sure. But it, you know, instead of blocking high or low, there's 3 different directions that you need to guard, um, or you can attack in 3 different directions instead of just high or low. Well, there's high, mid, low, but then most games, high and mid, you can block them with by standing. You get what I mean? You understand, right? I don't need to explain that. Okay. All right. So you got a third person shooter, but it's also a fighting game. And the environment, what I love about this game is that like the environments are so intricate and there's so much potential here for interacting with the environment and, to have a character that can't attack, but they can traverse the environment really well. And, maybe they can find, like, let's say you have like a detective character, like Light Yagami from Death Note, who's a character in Salty Bet. So funny when he shows up because he just wins instantly. But imagine like if you were to do Light Yagami, realistically, he can't go toe to toe with any of the other fighters, so he has to find evidence or find clues within the environment to learn the names of his opponents, and then he could write the name down and win that way, right? I think there's potential for a fighting game with that as a mechanic, and in fact, it's been done before. I think Phoenix Wright in MVC3, you literally dig in the. Let me see if I can pull that up, because he's super overpowered from what I hear. MVC3 Phoenix Wright. So if you watch this guy fight, like the maps are super. They're like, I mean, they're like really small, right? Nowhere near as big as For Honor, obviously, but honestly, I can't see a damn thing. But this resolution's really low. This was some tournament, and I guess they were streaming at 480p. But see, got convicted of a crime, and now Phoenix Phoenix just defeated Phoenix, I guess. There's Virgil. But Phoenix Wright, so as you're playing, you have to find clues in the environment, and he literally like digs through the ground. I wish I could find an example of that. And he'll find like, oh, here's the murder weapon. Maybe that's like at the start of the round. Let me go back. Let's see if I can find it. What was that? See, look right there, right there it was. Did you see it? Here it comes again. Right? See, he found something. Let me see if I can pause it. He's like looking for a clue. There he is, right there. Right there, in case you can't see him. And he's looking for a clue, and then he finds it, and he throws it. Or something. Oh, that wasn't what I was looking for. So that's what his gameplay consists of. But then he does all this like comic book shit, and he's actually doing physical attacks. So not what I'm thinking about. But we looked at For Honor, we looked at Virtual On. Virtual On it's a straight up third person shooter, but it's also undeniably a fighting game. So why is Virtual On a fighting game, but Quake 3 isn't? So if you have a duel in Quake 3, it's 1v1. The characters are similarly matched. They have all the same abilities. Let's get to the gameplay. I mean, the only difference is that it's in first person. So does the fact that it's a first person shooter, does that negate it from being a fighting game? I don't think it does, because Bushido Blade in 1998, that had a first person mode. It wasn't the main mode. But I think, the only difference between this and a game like Virtual On or For Honor is the fact that you can't see your opponent's health bar. But that doesn't, negate it from being a fighting game, because that's just one element that you take away. So, I mean, the only difference is the first person camera. And so that's kind of the crux of the issue. It boils down to intention and perception. The difference between Quake 3 and a fighting game, it seems to me, based on my research, is that the developers will set out from the beginning to create a fighting game. You know, so the developers need to intentionally try to make a fighting game, as is the case with Virtual On or For Honor. But with Quake 3, they were never trying to make a fighting game. They weren't intending to make a fighting game. So in order for this to be considered a fighting game, well, that boils down to the audience. They have to consider it a fighting game. But then there are people out there that they consider Overwatch to be Street Fighter 2. See, look, faces. Why? I don't want to see your stupid ass face when I'm looking at gameplay. There are people out there that consider Overwatch to be Street Fighter 2 in first-person shooter form. And like, if you were to take this and you were to have a duel between two characters, you know, and the thing about Overwatch is that you can see your opponent's health bar. Like, you know exactly how much damage you're doing to them. You know, and you have special attacks, just like Street Fighter. The only difference is that your special attacks in Overwatch, they're on a cooldown timer instead of being tied to button inputs, right? But like, the number of players, that doesn't determine what is and isn't a fighting game. You know, like 8v8, you can have an 8v8 fighting game. Like Dissidia has 3v3, I think, and Dissidia is very obviously a fighting game because it was intended to be that from the start. But I don't think that Blizzard had intended to make Overwatch a fighting game, but a lot of people consider it to be a fighting game, right? So then I was like, okay, you know what, like, where you can find some really interesting fighting game stuff is like Souls games, like Elden Ring. Elden Ring's PvP. Like, you cannot tell me that this isn't a fighting game. Like, this is an arena fighter through and through. Absolutely it is. Here, let's have some sound. Hopefully nobody... Oh, somebody's talking over that. Well, I'll make it real quiet. But you can't tell me that this isn't a fighting game. But Elden Ring is an action RPG. So if an action RPG can be turned into a fighting game, well, then what about a game like Diablo? And yeah, so when you do a 1v1 duel, or even a 2v2 or a 4v4 or 1v12, it doesn't matter. It's still a fighting game at the end of the day. But the difference is, like, the players have to collectively agree that it's a fighting game, because the developers didn't intend it to be. But that's what's weird about it, is that if it has all the mechanics of a fighting game, if for all intents and purposes it has all the elements of a fighting game, like, does that automatically make it a fighting game? And some people might say no. But to them I say, like, okay, look at Sweet Home on the NES, and I don't think it got remade for the SNES. No, it didn't. But Sweet Home for the NES it's a horror game. It's a horror RPG, I guess. The first Resident Evil was supposed to be a remake of that game, and then it turned into Resident Evil. Like, you know, we all know that Resident Evil was the first survival horror game, because that was the first game to use that nomenclature, survival horror. That term was created specifically for Resident Evil. but based on the gameplay mechanics, people retroactively looked at other games to see like, okay, what was the first survival horror game, which is why Alone in the Dark, which inspired the pre-rendered backgrounds from Resident Evil, Alone in the Dark is considered by many people to be a survival horror game, even though the term was created for Resident Evil in 1996. It was retroactively applied to Alone in the Dark, and I think that game was 93 or 94. But yeah, the term survival horror was retroactively applied to Alone in the Dark and Sweet Home, despite the fact that they were not intended to be survival horror games because that term didn't exist. So if the developers didn't intend from the beginning to make a survival horror game, but the term was applied to that game retroactively by the populace, by the public, if the public determines that, then it also has to be said that the term fighting game can be applied to a game like Elden Ring, despite the fact that the developers weren't trying to make a fighting game. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, right? Because to me, this looks like a fighting game through and through. It looks like an arena fighter. It's a different kind of arena fighter. It might not look like Ultimate Ninja Storm, but it has all the elements, all the mechanics of an arena fighter. To wrap things up, traditional fighting games are extremely easy to identify and define because they look like Street Fighter 2. But unorthodox fighting games like Elden Ring here, or Overwatch, or Quake 3, or Virtual On, or Diablo, what have you, whatever it is, that the term is more nebulous. The only difference is that with an unorthodox fighting game, the only thing that makes it a fighting game is you calling it that. And so, like most people would not agree until you convince them. So until I convince the world that Diablo can be a fighting game, technically, or any game, just name it, get Resident Evil 4, Gears of War, the God of War games, that's all, folks. Yeah. It's like, what's a traditional fighting game? Well, it's derivative of Street Fighter 2, obviously. But a non-traditional fighting game is pretty much any action game where your objective is to defeat an opponent can be considered a fighting game. That's pretty much it. That's the only definition. Any game where you have attacks to defeat an opponent is considered a fighting game, technically. You know what I mean? Whether it's a gun or a sword or punches and kicks or dropping things on people's heads, Hitman, great example. Is Hitman a fighting game? Well, do you have attacks that you can do that can be used to defeat opponents? Do your opponents fight back? Sometimes. Sometimes they can't. So is that the difference? Clearly there needs to be some sort of distinction. There needs to be some sort of constraint applied to the genre in order for it to exist. But, somebody help me out. I haven't been able to determine what that constraint should be. Because, you could argue that a fighting game has to be a game where, I think I would say the one concession that has to be made is that it needs to be multiplayer. There needs to be a multiplayer component, and then the opponent, the two players, the two combatants need to have similar abilities, which is why a beat 'em up is a subgenre of fighting games, but it doesn't count because the mobs that you fight, they don't have the same abilities as the player. So the two player characters, and one player could be AI, but optimally there needs to be a multiplayer component, and the two players need to have similar abilities, right? And so that's That leads to another issue, is that it's a matter of symmetry. To quote Liquid Snake, signs of symmetry. Brother! But that's the thing about fighting games, is that they generally have to be symmetrical. So that's the question that I'm asking myself with this idea I have for having characters that aren't traditional fighting game characters at all, but have them be within a fighting game setting. Is it possible to make a fighting game that's asymmetrical? An asymmetrical fighting game. Because you look at the duels in Elden Ring, right? And, both characters, even though they might have different builds, they're still a similar level, and they have the same abilities. They can both roll, they can both block if they have a shield, or, or maybe they don't have a shield. And so, like, you have all these different variations, but for the most part, the abilities are generally the same. Like, okay, so this guy right here, the opponent, he's got this giant sword. Nothing's stopping you from equipping that giant sword. You can have the same thing. So all the characters in Elden Ring, they have the same abilities, and that's generally how most fighting games go. That's kind of the defining trait of the fighting game. So if you remove that, if you get rid of that completely, or not completely, but like if you have a character who's like just super weak, who like they can't do any physical attacks. If they got hit once, they would explode. They're that weak. Like, could you have a character like that in a fighting game? Does that still qualify as a fighting game? If they're fighting somebody like Goku, somebody who's like, or the Hulk, who's insanely strong, can lift anything, can do all these attacks, the more I think about it, the more I start to think like this idea would never work. But, it's fun to think about. So that's something that's been on my mind recently is, like, is it still a fighting game if it's asymmetrical? Basically, I think that's basically the question that I'm asking. So, if you have any thoughts, you're welcome to weigh in. And, this has gone on long enough, I think. So, till next time.